Hi, everybody. So here we are back again, ready to add some more useful interactivity to our web page. And if we recall, right now, all our web app, quote unquote, does is throw out this little message once the page has loaded completely and says, hey, I'm ready. But what we're going to do in this tutorial is just add some basic click functionality, right? So make it so that when I click on a div, something happens. In this case, probably just popping up a message like that. And then we're going to take it one step further. I'm going to find out, we're going to see how to load data from a JSON file into our web page. Now, why is this important? Well, if you think about news, and you think about news websites, right, the news is changing all the time. So if you had to actually, like, if we look at the text here, it says this is div 1, this is div 2. You can imagine that it's not practical at all to actually have on a news website or almost any other kind of website to have somebody who sits there and creates one of these HTML pages, right, where they actually type in all this code and then publish it to the web. And so what we do is we create containers and we create styles. People use style sheets to sort of dictate how the page will lay itself out. But then you keep the content separately so that you can just worry about uploading the content, updating the content, and it will automatically appear on your web page when that content changes. In the real world, that content is driven by a database and all kinds of other things, but this will give us a good starting point. This exercise will give us a good starting point for sort of seeing how these systems all fit together. So back to the beginning here, we're going to start by adding some click functionality. Now, as we mentioned earlier, this I'm ready function basically says what it means when we get to that, when that function fires, right? When that function executes because the document ready event has fired. What it means is that at this point, if we're inside here, it means that our web page knows about all of the different divs and elements that are on our page. What that means is that we can now say, hey, I want you to add functionality to a specific div. So the way that we tell jQuery to go find a particular div on our HTML page and add functionality to it is we use this $ and parentheses. And then in quotation marks, we're going to put something that probably looks kind of familiar. We're going to put a £, and we're going to put the ID of the div. So if you notice, this is exactly the same thing that we used here in order to apply styles to that particular div. And in this case, what we want to do is we want to have it do something on click. And so because we're using jQuery, normally in JavaScript this would require all kinds of sort of ugly looking code. But because we're using jQuery, somebody has sort of taken all that background work out of it for us. And all we have to do is say click. And what goes in those parentheses, right? Same way as we saw in the document ready function. So when we say document ready, what it means is when the ready event happens, I want you to do whatever this function tells you. So in this case, the same logic applies. It's saying go grab page div 1, right? Grab that div box. And when the click event happens, i.e. when I, the user, click on that box, then I want you to follow the instructions that are in this function. Now again, I can make up whatever function name I want. So I'm going to say clicked, clicked div. Right? Make sure I get my semicolon on the end there. Now again, right now, if I were to try loading this page, nothing's going to happen. And in fact, it's possible that this might even break the rest of our code because JavaScript is going to look at, the browser is going to look at this and it's going to go, well, what's this clicked div thing? I've never heard of it. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just going to stop right here. And so every time you reference a function that way, you want to make sure that you actually write the function. And so in this case, we'll go ahead and we'll copy our function name, again, to make sure it's identical. And we're going to come up here and say click div, and then we're just going to put in another alert to see if we got what we thought we wanted. So I'm going to say alert clicked me, right? Very basic. Again, what it's actually doing is not all that interesting, but we're going to work up towards getting some more meaningful functionality out of this. But for now, let's see if this worked. So let's remember, I targeted page div 1, and here it says this is div 1. So I'm going to look for that. Let's open up our web page again. I'm going to go ahead and reload it. Got that hey, I'm ready thing going. But we haven't clicked div 1 yet, so we haven't gotten our other message. So hopefully, there you go. Really simple, but kind of cool. You know, things are kind of happening already. Now, the next step here is that we want to pull in some data. And pulling in data, first of all, we have to have some data to pull in. And in this case, I am going to use an existing file. And if you're not familiar with JSON at this point, then it's probably something that you're going to want to check out independently. So here we go. Where is my data? Where is my data? I have squirreled away a sample JSON file here. And again, if you're not familiar with the structure of JSON, it's something you should read up about. But basically, it's a data format that's used really commonly on the web, in large part because it's very easy for JavaScript to access parts of the file. So you can see that it's structured data here. You know, I've got the beginning of my document, and then I've got this property called doc name, and then I've got articles, and I've got 3 things that are articles. For now, I just want to load this file in, right? I want to tell the program, hey, go grab that file, and then I'm just going to, you know, access that doc name, just again alert that out to make sure that it's actually being loaded, that I'm able to access that information. So I'm going to go ahead and save a copy of this into my project folder, which is somewhere here. Here we go. So we save that down in there, and so now I can see there it is available. So in the same way that this document ready function is sort of a special event, if you will, we're going to use another special event, another special function. And this is called, in order to load this data, because again, loading this kind of data is something that people want to do pretty often on the web. And so jQuery has a really nice shortcut for it. So this function takes a few different what we call arguments. And the way that it looks is this. So you can look this up on jQuery.com if you look up making a quote-unquote GET request. But basically, it takes 3 primary arguments. It's going to take the name of the file. So in this case, we know from up here that it's samplejson.json, samplejson.json, right? Again, being very careful to make sure that we match everything about the file name exactly. The second argument that it takes is going to be the function name. What do I do once this thing is loaded? We're going to put in a function name. So I'm going to call mine content loaded. Obviously, I haven't written that yet, but that's OK. As long as I don't run it in between, it's not a problem. And then the third argument is saying, hey, what's the format of this data? Now, you might think that because the file name says samplejson.json, right? Duh, it's a JSON file. But jQuery is good, but it's not quite that good. So it isn't good enough to sort of look at the file extension in the name of the file you're loading and say, oh, obviously this is a JSON file. So that third argument is saying, look, that file you're getting is in the JSON format. I want you to interpret it as such. And so that way it knows kind of, the browser knows kind of how to like interpret the file and then get things out of it. So now, of course, I have to make sure that I write my content loaded function. So I'm going to come up here and say function content loaded. Now, in writing our other functions, we've actually never put anything between these round braces. It's not because we couldn't have. So the thing that happens, for example, when we're dealing with our content file, we make this request and we say, hey, give me this file. Well, it actually, that special get function actually returns something. It brings something back to the code that, to that sort of function handler code. And so we can give it any name we want. We tend to give it the name data. But basically, what that data parameter is, that's what we call something that's in those round braces, that data parameter is the file itself, right? So if you want to imagine, what does that data thing look like? It looks exactly like this. And if we want to access elements of it, the way we do that is with what we call dot syntax. So we're going to put in here, first of all, just an alert that says, hey, the content is loaded. That's a nice thing to reassure ourselves about. And then we want to just sort of we want to target part of the data that has something meaningful and distinct about it so that we know that we've loaded the right thing and it's working properly and all that. And so in this case, we're going to say doc name. So because the data parameter refers to this whole thing, if we want to get to doc name, we're going to write data.docname. So I'm going to say data.docname again, as always, making really careful, making really sure that this matches exactly what we see in this file. And if we're lucky, what will happen now is when we load this page, we're going to get three alerts. We're going to get this, hey, I'm ready, which tells us that the page is fully loaded. And then we're going to get this content loaded, hey, that data was loaded, and then we're going to get the specific doc name that's related to it. So cross our fingers, we're going to flip back to our browser here, give it a reload, hey, I'm ready, content loaded, things seem to be going well so far, and New York Daily News feed. So that's exactly what we were looking for. In the next segment, we're going to start talking about ways that we can actually use that content and its structure and what's in it and how many items it has to actually drive the layout and content of our page. Because as you can see, we haven't actually changed what's on our page. We've thrown up these messages, but we haven't really changed the content. And of course, that's ultimately what we want to do. But if you've kind of worked your way up to this point and mastered some of the basics, you'll see that actually these are the really fundamental building blocks of doing most of the tasks you're likely to have to do when you're working on a web app. So we'll see you next time.